Can you tell us maybe from personal experience what you would consider to be pastoral abuse and that sort of thing?
Well, yes. When, basically, if anybody within the community at all mentions anything positive that they ever do in terms of ministry or Sunday school volunteering or anything of that nature, that's completely frowned upon, it's actually discouraged vigorously. There are people that go in for counseling if they happen to connect with one of the pastors there who actually had a career before he became a pastor there as a Marine Corps lifer drill sergeant, if that tells you anything about the mentality. He verbally abuses people to a very brutal degree, and they go back for more. There's what you could call a kind of a symbiotic, sadomasochistic relationship sometimes that goes on between some of the parishioners and some of the pastors in particular.
Did the Jesus People movement ever really die? Did it die out, or?
That's a good question. What do you think, Priscilla?
I think to some extent it did, but it changed too. I think that we have different television stations now that have kind of continued it along. I think from my own reading that some of the Jesus People movement went into the much more authoritarian shepherding movement, which even went into the Roman Catholic Church. That movement is the philosophy that no man, especially no woman, can lead their own life without an elder, a guide, a shepherd to tell them what to do. And in the most abusive groups, that boils down to 24 hours a day, where you have to report all of your activities. And I think that the more extreme groups did go on and move and become more extreme.
Yeah, I think I've seen some of that in college with a group in Florida which is called the Sunrise Church of Christ, and in doing some research I found that this was definitely not a local group, that there was a Boston Church of Christ and there's an LA Church of Christ, and I've seen the shepherding movement in action. Fortunately, I was not involved with the group long enough for them to start shepherding me there. What about Set Free Fellowship? Have you had any experience with them?
I've had a tremendous number of complaints about Set Free Ministries.
What kind of stuff do you hear about them? Have the people been reporting to you?
Well, they have a place in Paris, California, supposedly for drug addicts. But I've not heard of anyone who had any problem with drugs going there. All of the people who attend Set Free need to dress like they're bikers. None of them have been bikers prior to getting involved with Set Free. Even at weddings, I've been told that all of the dress has to be black, even to the balloons. I'm kind of curious. I'd almost like to see a wedding. There are real privations as far as living conditions, and it's been a kind of a pecking order to move and live in houses that are near the leader of the organization. Recently, there's been quite a large exodus because of problems that they have found out in the leadership of sexual problems that the leader has had. But it is a very, very controlling group. One of the things that they had claimed was that they were helping the homeless. And I heard from several families who turned their homes over to the ministry, and then the ministry declared them homeless and then gave them another place to live. And I thought that was rather unique in my experience.
Well, that's pretty sneaky. I've been to, Trinity Broadcasting Network to watch their little presentations and see how they put things together. And I've been noticing that they've been using a lot of set-free labor. You see their bus out there and you see these scraggly biker types coming in there, working the cameras and all that. And it just seems like such an odd mixture to see people dressed rather nice and straight-laced with ties and, just the whole route. And then you got these burly bodyguard types running around there. And it's not that difficult for me to equate them almost with the Jesus People, because they seem to be thumbing their nose basically at the established mainstream or the mainline church. And this kind of ties in with Calvary Chapel, because it's my understanding that not that long ago, about 2 years ago, Calvary Chapel did a type of cult awareness seminar, and I use that loosely because I'm not trying to affiliate it with the Cult Awareness Network here, where the whole thing was devoted to bashing set-free ministries, and they brought all sorts of people who were refugees from it, telling all sorts of bad stories about Pastor Phil Aguilar and all that. I'm throwing this question out to both of you. Was that a PR ruse, or do you think that Chuck Smith really does care about destructive cults?
Well, it's been my observation that all fundamentalist groups will have some type of cultish awareness forums of one type or another. The problem is that they don't recognize the cultish traits within themselves. I mean, we used to study the Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormonism, Christian Scientism, all of the isms, and the problem is that we did not recognize the symptoms that they have, we had within our own community and within our own individual lives. So I think that when Chuck Smith and different people, have these different things, they're just completely in a state of denial.
I think one of the interesting things about the set-free ministries, probably an interesting thing about fundamentalism on a whole, is how they incorporate various parts of the world's entertainment, which they, to the best of my knowledge, regard as sinful and wrong, and Christians shouldn't have anything to do with it, but yet they incorporate various parts of it into their own worship. Point of reference is you can watch Phil Aguilar's show of Set Free on TBN and just watch it. It's on Channel 40. I don't know what time. You'd have to keep your dial on constantly until you run into it. But I turned it on once, and what I thought I saw was Phil Aguilar pretending to be a rock and roll singer. He was actually singing with a microphone while he had some of his little teeny boppers there going. And I'm not sure what the song was. It sure did sound to me like the Divinals, I Touch Myself, but there was some kind of a religious significance, like I touch my Lord or something like that. I don't know. But it's just kind of amazing. There's a line in the Steve Martin movie called Leap of Faith where he says, I'm not deceptive, or I'm not sneaky. Sneaky people are deceptive. I'm obvious. And you look at some of these people, and they seem so obvious in their deception. I just can't see how an intelligent person would fall for this, which leads me to you, because I know you get these questions. How can intelligent people be hooked up into cults?
They are in the wrong place at the wrong time, and in a very vulnerable time in their lives, a normal vulnerable time. Breakup of a love affair, a divorce, change of jobs, starting school, finishing school, older citizen, worried about their mortality. And someone comes along and gives them love and concern and caring and clings on their every word and sells them a bill of goods.
Now, it's safe to assume, just from hearing you talk, that you are no longer affiliated with Calvary Chapel. What brought about this change? Was it one particular thing, or was this a gradual growth out of the Calvary Chapel mindset?
Change? You mean how I'm critical of them?
Right.
At one time,
because at one time there was a time when you weren't really that critical of them because you were working for Chuck Smith.
Yes. Well, actually, even when I was on staff there, I never actually believed in Chuck Smith. If he knew that now, well, obviously, if he knows I'm speaking about him now, he's going to have a fit. But which is good. I mean, I think they need to wake up to the mistakes that they're making. What brought about I didn't really have a sudden change. My problem is that I've had a long-term habit of reading and thinking, and the people in that community do not read and think. If they do read, it's only the prescribed narrow-minded books within the fundamentalist community that they're allowed to read, but anything outside of that community is really anathema to them. So while I was always skeptical of leadership while I was there, the more time passed after I left, the more it became obvious to me how extremely wrong and dangerous the group actually is.
Dangerous. That really seems to be kind of a loaded word. By dangerous, you
Oh,
mean
yes.
as far as just ruining somebody's self-esteem, or do you mean dangerous as in something like Michael Griffith shooting an abortionist?
I will go so far as to say this. In the years, in several years that I was practicing in Orange County in psychotherapy after I left Calvary Chapel, I had actually dozens of clients come to me that had come out of the Calvary Chapel movement that were extremely psychologically damaged as a result of being in the movement. Most of them were actually damaged personally by their relationships with Pastor Laverne Romaine there. And this is, I mean, I have records to show it. I have, you know, their testimony that they came in, they were extremely damaged by their involvement there.
Is this the experience that you have when you generally get calls about Calvary Chapel?
Actually, we have had some complaints, but we really get very few complaints about Calvary Chapel. But you know, the process of learning is our experience with most people leaving destructive cults. Takes one little tiny thing, and they suddenly have to begin to confront years of doubts. Most people do leave these groups on their own. It may take 10 or 15 or 20 years to find that little thing that makes them want to learn something outside the group, but it's mostly people leaving on their own and seeking help.
Well, Geoffrey, what would you say to somebody who has been brought up in the Calvary Chapel movement, or let's say they chose at one point to be a part of the Calvary Chapel movement or any fundamentalist movement, and they invested years of their lives into this, let alone savings, you know, just years of their lives, and then suddenly they come to that point where they have to leave, but their whole life has been so wrapped up that they know that if they do, it will just devastate them. What can such people do to make that transition a little bit more easier?
Well, I think they definitely need a support group of some kind. I mean, some outside objective group of people that can help them, support them. They need to make new friends. They need to read. They need to begin using their mind, stop watching television, stop listening to fundamentalist preachers, and really begin thinking for themselves and developing their own lives for the first time, possibly.
Well, thank you for that piece of advice, and I'm glad you were able to show up again for this show here. And if you would like more information about, I don't know, support groups or about just information on cults in general, we'll be running some phone numbers, and you can give them a call and get the type of information you need. Of course, I want to reemphasize Geoffrey Hill, who has an essay coming out in an anthology called The Book Your Church Doesn't Want You to Read, and he is also the author of this book, Illuminating Shadows, The Mythic Power of Film. I'd like to thank the two of you for being with us. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week on Mars Hill.